Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey. The Moms I Know is your go-to source for motivation, inspiration, and resources, and real conversation about motherhood and parenting with intention. Thank you for being a part of our community. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
We have such a brief opportunity to pass on to our children our love for this earth and to tell our stories. These are the moments when the world is made whole. Richard Louv.
Lovely. Good morning. This is Maria, and we want to welcome you to the Moms I Know. Today we have Linda McGurk, the author of one of my favorite books, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather. It's a Scandinavian mom's secrets for raising healthy, resilient, and confident kids. And Linda, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm going to have you tell us a little bit more about your background and your work. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the part of your book that's in parentheses. So if you could add that little title, I would really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on this podcast today. I really appreciate it. The words I think you're looking at are from friluftsliv to hygge.
Yes.
So we can, I can explain more about those later. But obviously I wrote this book after having children in the U.S. I was born and raised in Sweden myself. And once I had kids in the U.S., I realized how different it was and what a different childhood they were going to have compared to, what I had growing up in Sweden. And I thought there were so many interesting just differences between the two parenting cultures that I thought, somebody should write a book about this, and that somebody turned out to be me. So here we are.
Well, I appreciate you writing the book so much. Sheila and I, Sheila is not on the podcast today, but I wanted to mention the fact that she and I have done so many podcasts about this concept of getting children in nature. And I am so aware of, in Sweden, it is just part of childhood and even adulthood in a different way. So I would love to talk about that first. And then I also want to talk, as we're recording this, the world is facing a global pandemic. So I want to talk a little bit about, how we're dealing with that now. So right now, just if I think we should just plunge into this whole concept of how important it is to have children outside, out in nature. And so if you could tell a little bit more about your background, your story, I would really appreciate it.
Right. So in Sweden and actually Scandinavia as a whole, nature is considered key to a good childhood. So basically we get babies outside from when they're very young. It's pretty common or very common for little babies to nap outside. And not just when it's nice out, but also in the winter, in the cold and freezing temperatures. Babies and toddlers typically nap outside, and not just at home, but also at childcare centers and preschools. And the reasoning behind this being that, being outside reduces the risk of infection, because preschools, and as we know, all places where kids and are sort of, you have a lot of kids confined in small spaces, it's a breeding ground for germs. So it's something that's recommended by the government as well, and physicians. They all recommend, outdoor napping, and it's actually mandated. Preschools are mandated to provide outdoor play, and they do every day, regardless of the weather. So that's where the name of the book, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, it comes from an old Scandinavian saying. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. And when you grow up in Sweden, this is, you hear this all the time. It's what your parents tell you, is what your preschool teachers tell you, your teachers, your doctor, you hear it from everywhere. So there's no point in whining about the weather. And it's, the weather over here is not great most of the time. So what are you going to do? You can't hibernate, right? You just gotta learn to appreciate the weather for what it is. And kids are very good at that. So when you grow up with this culture, I think it becomes ingrained. It becomes part of your fabric. So, as the kids get older, they sort of retain this, and even in the higher grades, the recess is outdoors every day, and the kids have plenty of recess. And then I think the parents also uphold this culture of outdoor play, and that's where friluftsliv comes in. It means, loosely translated, open air life. And it can involve a lot of different activities, but really it's just about being in nature and connecting with nature in a very simple way. You don't have to have a particular agenda when going outside. It's just about, immersing yourself in nature.
I love this. Both my husband and I have a Scandinavian background, and we've visited relatives in Sweden and Finland, and we've really seen that. And just, that if the sun was out, the shirts, the men would just take their shirts off and be out absorbing sunshine. And at midsummer, we just stayed up throughout these long days. And we said, my sister and I were there visiting when we were younger, and we said, when do you sleep? And they said, in the winter. It's the joy of living. And so I really appreciate you explaining that term. And then, obviously, coming to the United States, there was a real culture shift for you.
There was. I realized that the expectations on little kids were very different from in Sweden. Whereas, here, kids, the most important activity, if you will, for kids under, say, 7 or so is basically play, and specifically outdoor play. Parents don't really have a lot of expectations academically on their kids before they start school, which they do at age 6 here. And
you're talking about in Scandinavia in general.
From when Scandinavia in general. So not just Sweden, but all the Nordic countries sort of share this. And in the U.S., when I enrolled my kids in preschool, they were it was very academic, and I was so surprised. They were getting drilled, learning to write their names and do letter tracing. They were even given homework when they were 4 years old, and I didn't know what to think. It was just such a shock to me. Whereas my friends' kids over here in Sweden, they were just outside at preschool, climbing trees and making mud pies and digging holes to china. And my kids were stuck in this classroom doing wall words. And I noticed too from the preschool teachers, they were so frustrated because they felt like they were being pressured more and more. They even felt bad for letting the kids have, periods of free play, because they felt like they had to constantly be teaching, to make them kindergarten ready. That was, what it was all about, kindergarten ready. I don't know. I mean, and for me, this was so abstract. I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, it was just so different from what I had expected. So,
and this is what Sheila and I have been trying to advocate, this idea of letting children be children. And we talk about being the guardians of childhood. And so, we know the brain research is in, the developmental research is in, children need to play, and nature, as you've said, is their best playground. And when we look at, even the literacy rates in Scandinavia versus the United States, you're on to something here.
Yes, I know. I just don't see the point of, you can teach a lot of kids to read when they're 4 or 5, but if they're not ready for it, why would you want to push that when the research clearly shows that there's no advantage to kids reading at 4 versus 7? There are even studies showing that when the kids get older, those who are pushed to read early, they don't enjoy it as much when they get older. And I think that's really a shame. You want to keep that love of reading.
I've seen that over and over, and I've just tried to help people understand that, what is the goal here? Do you want your child to be an early reader or a lifelong reader? And every parent says a lifelong reader. And so it's like, can we just relax a little bit about all of this?
Yes.
To push them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
So you had your children here in the United States. You were raising them. And so what about this concept of the outside time? And how did you then adjust to that?
So I felt pretty alone in my mission to get my kids outside every day. That was just so part of my fabric, because it's something that I've heard my entire life, that you have to get outside, get fresh air every day, regardless of the weather. So since they weren't getting any outdoor playtime, neither at their babysitters nor at preschool, and then later at school, outdoor recess, once it got cold out or rainy or windy or whatever, the kids were just, they were stuck inside. They would not let them out. So I just try to make up for all that at home, which, I was fortunate to work part-time when they were younger. So I was able to get them outside when they got back from preschool and school, and just try to foster this sort of spirit at home instead. I tried working with the school as well, but I found it very hard, both with the preschool and especially the school. It's very hard to change the system unless you have an administration that really advocates for outdoor play and really gets it, the benefits. And I don't think that's too common today. I'm sort of hoping that it will eventually have this sort of breakthrough, and that people will realize the benefits, but it was an uphill battle at the time. So I just had to do what I could at home.
I think people are starting to really understand, and certainly after this period of, we're all being asked to stay at home here in the United States. Most of the states now have put in place stay-at-home directives, and I see it happening all around the world. But prior to this pandemic, I think there were so many initiatives here in the United States, forest schools, which I think pretty much originated in Scandinavia and Europe. So, but just this idea of forest schools, outdoor education, the Waldorf schools. We did a lot of homeschooling when our children were young, and a lot of outdoor education, and then found Waldorf education where the children went out no matter what the weather. And so I think it's coming, but certainly I've also seen exactly what you've been describing in many, many schools around this country, and this push for early academics. But hopefully with the research coming, and with people like you who, writing this incredible book, and for, Sheila and I talking about it, and many, many other educators who are saying, wait a minute, let children be children. Play is the most important thing. So, yes. And we were talking before the recording a little bit about how things are in Sweden right now. So if you could talk a little bit about how this is affecting your outside time right now.
So Sweden has taken a different path in this. We're not on lockdown right now, and our government, the state epidemiologist, is actually recommending people to get outside, just observe, social distancing. You're not allowed to gather more than 50 people in one place. But what's interesting is that they definitely do not recommend people to hole up in their apartments or houses, because they're saying, that's harmful too. They are actually telling people to go out and get some sun, get some fresh air. Just don't hug the neighbor and keep your distance. And of course, this is a little easier here. We have amazing access to nature areas in this country. It's different if you're in New York City. You're with millions of other people in a very small, small area. Here, even the cities have a lot of green spaces. So unfortunately, I heard the U.S. is closing a lot of the state parks and national parks because people are flocking there, which I understand that they are. But then I guess they were thinking that the risk is too great of spreading the infection. Whereas we don't have that problem here. With so many nature areas, people are not on top of each other, so we can still get out. And I think it's especially important for kids to still be able to get outside. And but I'm seeing a lot of initiatives online. I'm still following a lot of people, a lot of educators over in the U.S., and I'm seeing all these initiatives to sort of get kids outside during this difficult time, and just sort of trying to adapt and maybe using nearby nature areas, which I've always been a big advocate for. I don't think you necessarily have to take your kids to, Yellowstone or some other national park to get them to appreciate nature. I think it's even more important to get them connected to the nature areas that are in your neighborhood, even if they're not picture perfect. They are certainly, in many cases, good enough for a child. A backyard is a world of adventure for a small child. So
I grew up in a suburban area in California, and it was just, we were always out in the yard, and there was a vacant lot across the street, and that was, paradise for us as small children. Yeah. And then, here moving to Montana, I have seen, this real focus on that there's no such thing as bad weather. In fact, my son-in-law was the first person that said that, and it was just bad gear. And so we've been embracing that and getting out every single day, no matter what, and just really appreciating that. If you can also talk about, obviously the benefits of the children being outside from the perspective of not spreading the, germs as much, but, can you tell us a little bit more about all of the other benefits that you speak of in your book, of being outside?
Yeah. And there are so many, and not just physical benefits, but just to go into that a little bit, the research shows that obviously when you're outside, the kids, they move around more, which that in itself helps prevent all these lifestyle diseases that we're seeing today: obesity, diabetes, heart disease, these big challenges that we have from a health perspective. And then also kids who play outside a lot. For example, they've done these studies on kids who go to forest school, where they play outside for the better part of the day. And they found that they have stronger motor skills. So they have better balance and coordination, for example. And then, of course, just being outside, you get vitamin D, which is crucial to immune function. And also it's good for your vision, so it helps prevent nearsightedness. And then there are all the cognitive and social benefits as well. So, outdoor play, it automatically, there's some inherent, they call it risky play. I think people misunderstand the term a little bit. It's not hazardous play, but it's just play that involves some risk of getting injured. It could be, climbing trees or balancing on a log, or, jumping from rock to rock over a creek. And that, really teaches things about risk management and how to judge risk. So it's just really good for them. And also outdoor play has been shown to improve kids' executive function, which is just the way they make decisions and delaying gratification, which is huge when it comes to, learning of all kinds, and also kids become resilient from playing outside, which is another huge benefit in life in general, and future academic studies and work. And also kids who have different diagnoses like ADHD and so forth tend to focus better after they spent some time outside. So, and then there are other things as well. Kids, play more creatively outside. They collaborate more. They fight less over toys because, there are just less toys, when you're in nature. And I could go on and on, but that's just, some of the really big benefits of outdoor play.
No, thank you so much for sharing those. We've talked about some of these things in our previous episodes, but you put that together so succinctly. And, when I talk to my children and, for their children, my grandchildren, I say, plus they sleep better. We just see that
yes.
so much. So many kids having problems, falling asleep, and it's like, okay, well, how much outdoor time did you have today? So that's the real one that I keep talking to the families that I work with about as well. So thank you for sharing all of that. I wanted to ask you another question about when you share this information with parents, especially here in America, what kind of objections do you get? And why do you feel that, we're limiting our children in this way? And what can we do to kind of overcome that?
I think a lot of it has to do with fear. A lot of Americans, I think, grew up having at least similar childhoods, compared to what I had, with a lot of people, a lot of Americans, older Americans remember having a childhood when they were outside playing a lot. I'd say at least those who are 40 and over, but a lot of younger parents don't. So for them, I think it's partly fear of just not being maybe not that connected with nature themselves, so they don't they're not sure of how to go about connecting their kids with nature, or may not even realize that that it's so essential for kids' health and well-being. Also, the way the culture has gone with being very risk averse. I think some people are afraid of maybe being judged by other parents if they let their kids play in certain ways, getting dirty and climbing trees and getting messy. That doesn't fly well with everybody. So I think, nobody likes being judged, and I think that's part of it. But also, I think there's a big fear of kids falling behind if they are not constantly just being, if they're not constantly being taught or having these extracurricular activities. I think there's this concern that they're not learning enough if they're just playing, which can, that's just this big misconception. And I'm like really hoping that this free play movement will really sort of take off so that parents don't have to feel guilty about letting their kids play. And then, of course, there's fears about nature itself, kids getting hurt. Traffic could be an issue for some parents. And also there's a huge fear of abductions. And even though statistically that's, it's not, it's so rare that it's hardly even measurable. But the fears are real. So we're having to, we have to deal with that and just sort of try and reassure parents by presenting the research and the facts, and so that parents realize that, letting your kids just sit on a couch and play video games, there's risk to that as well. And more, I would say even a bigger risk of them, not, being hurt in the long run from just not being healthy and not forming healthy habits. So, but I think a lot of people don't think about that. They think, well, the kids are safe if they're inside at home, but no, there's risk to that as well.
So it all comes down to educating parents. And I've certainly seen this because, of course, my childhood was just outside. My mom would just say, go play. And, at school we had plenty of outside recess, and then we would play in nature, and we would go up to the mountains and the seashore and all of that. My children had that, and we didn't have technology or television when they were little. And sometimes they'd ask, why don't we? And I said, because we're doing you a favor. We're letting you have, childhood and nature and all of that. And, they've all thanked us as adults. And, most of them are, raising their kids without a whole lot of the technology. And so I think that that's really important, that as we start to see the research and see the statistics, that we can educate parents about what's truly healthy. And I think that this whole, looking to these, the different cultures and sharing what is so helpful and is working is so important. So really appreciate that you have shared all of this information with us. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we, get into our listeners today?
No, I just wanted to add, that is exactly the reason why I wrote the book, because I wanted to reassure parents that it is okay for them to let the kids be outside and play and get dirty and let them take risks and be outside, even if it's not sunny and 70 degrees, it's okay. And I hear from readers all the time who tell me that they thank me because they feel like they've been vindicated in some cases for their parenting style, and they now realize that they were not alone, because there are a lot of people who are out there, and they feel like they really want to give their kids, this type of childhood, but they don't know exactly how. And like I said before, they're afraid of being judged. And I think that my book is sort of helping them feel reassured in their parenting choices. So, I want to get it in the hands of as many parents and educators as possible. Really, anybody who works with children or deals with children in their daily lives.
Well, thank you so much. I truly appreciate the information that you've shared today. And, Sheila and I, with our podcast, The Moms I Know, we're trying to help parents make healthy choices around all of the issues of childhood and healthy family life. And this is such an important aspect. And it just makes me want to make sure I bundle up today and get out.
Yes, me too. We have a bit of a storm here brewing today, but I need to get out for a little walk at least. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you have chosen to take your children back to Sweden to raise them now. And so, obviously those of us here in America, we can make choices to get outside as much as possible, whether you are in the city or out in the countryside, that there's nature everywhere. And so to find this and take advantage of it. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Love the quote that you started with. If people want to learn more, can you tell us how we can get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. I would recommend checking out my blog, www.rainershinemama.com, and that's mama with 2 N's. Okay. And they can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram.
At Rainer Shine Mama. Great. Yep. And again, the book, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, which has become our mantra here in Montana. We've been enjoying every aspect of it here. It's April 2nd as we're recording this today. It will probably be coming out in a few weeks, but snowy day here as well. So thank you so much. We'll be posting all of that in the show notes as well. So for Sheila and I and for all of our listeners, Linda, thank you so very much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us today for The Moms I Know. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To get the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode, visit themomsiknow.com. For information on Maria's programs, visit thefutureoffamily.com. And for information on Sheila's programs, visit purplebeetfamily.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on iTunes and follow us on Instagram at The Moms I Know Podcast. Until next time, have a joyful family journey.